This is Lightsmas by Lady Kit. Summary: Lightsmas is supposed to be a happy time of year, but Entrapta has never felt connected to the holiday. Hordak has never even heard of it. Rating: General Audiences. For Deck of Dragons. Hordak huffed, tugging at the knitted cap Entrapta had pulled down over his ears. What is the purpose of this again? To keep your ears warm! It was, indeed, keeping his ears warm, but... You don't like it? He glanced at her, noting the way her brows had furrowed. No doubt she was already trying to find another way to keep his ears warm if this method didn't please him. I did not say that. His ears twitched, their movement restricted by the warm hat. It is simply odd. I will become accustomed to it in time. Okay. You know you don't have to wear it, right? We can try something else. He waved her off. Yes. If it becomes uncomfortable, I will remove it. Just let me know. I think a hood might keep you just as warm, but it would be less restrictive. He paused. A hood? His interest must have been obvious, because she grinned broadly and said, A hooded cloak would probably be perfect for you, actually. Let me go grab one. She was already running back into the castle before he could say another word. He sighed, but a fond smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. She'd been so concerned for his comfort when the snows first arrived. It was difficult not to find it endearing. He was grateful, too. His body fat percentage was very low, leaving him rather more vulnerable to the cold than he'd like to admit. When she returned, he traded the hat for a hooded cloak and nodded to her. Yes, this is a significant improvement. He adjusted the hood and looked to her. We are ready now? She nodded vigorously, and both climbed aboard what she was currently calling Darla Jr., a hovercraft with a duplicate of Darla's AI patched into her circuits. As they traveled, Entrapta spoke about her hopes for the craft, that she'd be able to link her back up to Darla's main crafts to expand the AI experiences, and her concerns, that DJ would develop too quickly past Darla's capabilities and wouldn't be able to be reincorporated. Of course, that just means DJ would be her own separate entity, and I really can't be too disappointed about that. I'd just like to see what Darla's capable of when introduced to more stimuli. Space is fascinating. He smiled just a touch, hearing how she stretched the word out. But it doesn't have nearly the same variability found planet-side, particularly when organic life is present. Are you concerned about her capacity? Darla was developed as a spacefaring vessel. It is possible this manner of exploration may stretch her capacity for learning past her limits. Entrapta nodded. That's why I split DJ off from Darla. Hordak nodded. I see. And this sojourn is... an experiment! Naturally. Their craft slowed at the border of Trock, Drill's capital, and the nearest city the Crypto Castle. The afternoon sun faded early at this time of year, and it was now dark enough to see the city was lit by strands of white lights. Hordak's ears twitched. That is new. She nodded, lowering her face mask. It's to celebrate Lightsmas. Lightsmas? Her hair coiled and her hands fluttered. It's a celebration. For the end of the year and the start of the new. There's some cultural significance to it. I could find you some sociology papers on it if you like. Her voice lacked its normal exuberance when revealing this new information to him. His ears folded down. I believe I would like that. I forgot to mention, I have something to take care of before we go home. She didn't raise her mask even as DJ came to a stop in one side street. Do you want to come? She asked him, head cocked but face still concealed. He studied her. You do not seem pleased by this task. Her pigtail shrugged. You can wait here if you like. That was not an answer to his implied question, but Entrapta was already heaving herself out of the cockpit and into the snowy streets. Hordak followed suit, though he used the steps. The icy air made him pull his cloak more tightly around him. She scanned him, and he knew she was using the heat sensor setting to check for developing cold spots on his body. This shouldn't take long. He followed a few steps behind her, taking note of their surroundings. The fine hairs on the back of his neck were pricked up, not because of the cold. White lights were strung from every building, creating zigzag patterns over the street. Evergreen broths were wrapped around street lamps and hung over the lintels of every door. Orb lights bobbed in windows, and white ribbons hung from the eaves of every house. He raised a brow ridge. This lightness had more cultural significance than Entrapta had implied if he were to judge the amount of uniformity of the decorations alone. Then again, he did not think it was a deliberate omission. Rather, it seemed caused by a lack of enthusiasm. She did not bounce or frolic or marvel at the streets around them. Instead, she trudged through the snow, mask down. Determined, committed, but reluctant nonetheless. He paused. Starlight? The name caused her to freeze. Her hand clenched closed, and her hair coiled into a tight knot. Please, she said, voice muffled by the mask. Not right now. As you wish. She took a deep breath, and they continued their lonely trek through the snow. Just as he was beginning to wonder where everyone was, he heard singing up ahead. His ears folded down. It was not the singing of trained vocalists, but the singing of a massive group of people. More like organized shouting than anything else. The lyrics were only occasionally audible and made little sense to him without context. The city square came into view, and he could see children running past with long sticks spitting sparks from their hands. It seemed much, if not all, of the city's occupants had gathered there. Hordak hesitated only a moment, still apprehensive of the gathered Ethereans, before he followed Entrapta into the city square. A ripple went through the crowd as they caught sight of her, parting with a cheer to let them through. The crowd shouted at them as they passed. Hordak's ears folded back at the assault, though he recognized by their smiles that this was meant to be a positive thing. Their various greetings and good wishes were jumbled and indistinguishable, but the general idea was they wanted their princess and her consort to have a present Lightsmas was conveyed. At the center of the crowd, Entrapta ascended a dais to a further eruption of cheers. It was all Hordak could do not to flinch at the volume. She gestured for him to remain at the base of the dais while a man approached her. The town's leader, Hordak thought, though he couldn't remember his name or title. Greetings, Princess. Happy Lightmas. Entrapta waved with one pigtail. Hi. He waited, smiling, as if he expected something more. When it wasn't forthcoming, he cleared his throat and spread his arms wide. It's always good to see you here, fulfilling royal duties. Lightsmas was always so important to your parents. I know they're looking down on you with pride. She nodded noncommittally. Thanks. His welcoming gesture flagged. Will you be saying anything this year? Your mother always had such heartening speeches. No. Oh, just the fireworks then? She nodded and pulled a small datapad from somewhere. With that she crouched, gremlin-like on the stage, and began fiddling with the datapad. The man hovered behind her. He raised a finger and seemed about to ask a question when she sat back on her heels. Done. From somewhere else in the city, or just outside it, a high-pitched whistle began to grow louder. A streak of light appeared in the sky, and a loud boom accompanied the sudden starbursts of light that shimmered down over them. Everyone gathered, oohed, and cheered, but Entrapta just remained huddled on the dais, hunched over the pad. She passed the datapad to the man, explaining quickly how the emergency override worked if something went wrong. Then she hurried down the steps toward Hordak. You're leaving? Won't you stay for the feast? No, thank you. Not even for the fireworks? Another high-pitched whistle interrupted him. Then the loud boom made Hordak flinch, the sound reminding him of less pleasant times. No, thanks, she said again. We'll watch them from somewhere else. Oh, okay. No one but him seemed to notice they were leaving, too distracted by the light show. As they retraced their steps to DJ, Hordak walked beside Entrapta rather than behind her. The flash of fireworks overhead cast strange, shifting shadows in the snow and lit the powder strangely. You are upset, he observed. She shrugged, but didn't deny it. After a few moments, she said, Everyone loves Lightsmas. It's supposed to be fun, but... She shrugged. It's just so loud, and bright, and cold. I see. He followed her for a few steps. We do not have to remain where it is loud and bright and cold. You don't want to watch the fireworks? She raised her mask. She sounded hopeful. He watched the next streak of light, flattening his ears. I believe I have seen as much as I care to. She smiled a little. Chef went home to her family for the holidays, but I think we can manage tiny hot chocolate by ourselves. I'm quite sure we can. And she probably left some tiny cookies in the kitchen. They walked in silence for a little longer. Entrapta seemed noticeably bouncier. As they reached DJ's door, though, she paused and said, Lightmas is supposed to be the happiest time of year, but even when my parents were here, I never... She touched her mask, but didn't lower it. You can stay if you want. You don't have to leave because of me. Starlight, I have never heard of this holiday before this moment. It holds no significance to me. If you do not wish to celebrate, then we simply won't celebrate. She lowered her hands and smiled. Let's go, then! She clambered into the cockpit, and he followed in a more stately manner. Oh, before I go home for hot chocolate, do you mind if I run a few more tests on DJ? I want to see how she handles in fresh snow. I can think of no better way to spend the evening than experimenting with you. Her hair wrapped around him, and with a grin, she threw the craft into gear. Then let's go! Darla jerked away from the street, engines humming as they sped over the snow. Overhead, the fireworks lit the sky, unnoticed by the two scientists encased in their craft, more enamored with each other and their experiments than the spectacle of light and sound. This was Lightsmas by Lady Kit, read by Star1412. If you like this, let me know in the comments. If you have any suggestions for fanfics you'd like me to read, let me know. I'll see what I can do. Thanks for listening.